Thanks for listening to the ArtTactic podcast. I'm your host, Adam Green. While in the West, we are focused on the reopening of the art world after the summer hiatus with the Armory Show. Across the globe, the spotlight was on Seoul, where Frieze Seoul returned for its fourth edition. And honestly, given the caliber of galleries participating in the fair, one could argue that Frieze Seoul has actually become even more important than the Armory. To help us unpack this year's edition of Frieze Seoul, we're joined by Andy St. Louis, an art critic and curator and the newly appointed director of Frieze House Seoul, an exhibition space for galleries in the city. We discuss how important Frieze Seoul has become in the Korean art market, how the mix of galleries has shifted since its debut 4 years ago, and what the energy was like at this year's edition. We hope you enjoy our conversation. Thanks so much for listening. Andy, thanks so much for joining us all the way from Seoul. How have you been?
Hi, Adam. I'm great. Yeah, thanks for having me back.
Well, I'm sure last week was really busy for you with not only the fair, but all the festivities around the city. So we appreciate you taking some time now to chat with us. So I remember when Frieze made the announcement that they were expanding to Asia and they would be opening up a Frieze Seoul. And here we are. The fourth edition just happened this past week. It's pretty incredible. Before we dive into how this year's edition of the fair went, tell us how important has the fair actually become within the Korean art market, and where's the momentum of its importance headed as we enter this week?
Sure. Frieze Seoul, I think, is not only a landmark event for the Korean art market, but really for the city of Seoul more broadly. And a big reason for this is that KIAF, which is the Korea International Art Fair, takes place concurrently with Frieze Seoul at COEX, which is the city's largest convention center. And both fairs are accessible with a single ticket, which makes it extremely convenient for collectors and general audience members to move back and forth between the fairs and really make a whole day or a whole week looking at art and really enjoying all the exhibitors that are on view. So since last year, Seoul Fashion Week has also coincided with Frieze Week, which is sort of, a bid to attract some of the same collectors and public figures that are at COEX to some of these runway shows that are being held. So it really is quite a huge event for the whole city. And there are countless other art fairs that take place throughout the country, not only in Seoul, but in Busan and Daegu. But this first week in September, when Frieze Seoul and KIAF happen, it's always when the highest volume of art sales takes place. And it's the time when the city's museums and galleries all open their biggest shows of the year. And it's also when the country's biennials open to the public. So on odd number years, it's the Seoul Media City Biennale. So this year, visitors to Frieze Seoul were fortunate not to have to travel southward down to the Gwangju Biennale or the Busan Biennale, which take place in even numbered years. But, in terms of Seoul's position in the art market, it's definitely been an important catalyst for growth here in Korea. And I think it's important to remember that prior to the fair's inaugural edition in 2022, there were just 6 international galleries that had outposts here in Seoul. But since then, there have been nearly a dozen more that have opened. And the art scene is really as diverse and dynamic as it has ever been here in Seoul. So, of course, markets around the world have been struggling in recent years. And of course, Seoul is no exception. But this was cause for a bit of trepidation in the lead up to this year's fair, especially following the sort of uninspiring sales numbers that came out of Frieze New York in May and Art Basel in June. But from a local perspective, Frieze Seoul has really firmly established itself as a cultural juggernaut in the country and in the region more broadly. And I think the reason for this is it's really done a lot to integrate with the Korean art community and collaborate with an array of art spaces here, whether they be commercial spaces, museums, or nonprofits. And really at the forefront of this is the fair's series of neighborhood nights, which essentially activate a different area of the city each night throughout the week. So there are 4 different neighborhood nights now, beginning on Monday, which is held in the sort of grungy streets of Uljiro. And then Tuesday, it moves to the very trendy Hanam neighborhood. Wednesday, which is the day that the fair opens to VIPs, that night is held in the very glitzy and upscale Cheongdam neighborhood in Gangnam, very close by COEX Convention Center. And then the biggest night of the week is on Thursday. That's the day that the fair opens to the general public. And that night is in the Samcheon neighborhood, which is sort of the traditional historic center of the Korean art world. So it's been really important, I think, for Frieze to invest this much in activating these spaces and really bringing in a lot more of the local community rather than sort of only catering to collectors or people who just fly in just for the week.
Looking at the galleries exhibiting this year, how does the mix compare with maybe the first or second edition of the fair? Because I remember when Frieze Seoul launched, a lot of American and European galleries, they were really eager to participate, to connect with collectors there, to cultivate relationships and really introduce their entire programs to this market. Of course, doing this is a big investment for a gallery. You participate in one or multiple fairs, maybe you hire people that are based there, and sometimes this investment pays off and other times it doesn't. Do you feel like Western galleries are still as enthusiastic about being part of the fair and the market in Korea today?
The overall number of galleries has remained virtually the same. It's around 120 exhibitors. But there's a shift that we began to see last year, which is toward a stronger presence of Asian galleries and sort of an attrition of Western galleries. And this became more pronounced this year. There were 64% of exhibitors at Frieze Seoul, actually, which operate gallery spaces in the region. And it's up significantly from last year. Last year was 48%. And then back in 2022, when the fair launched for the first time, it was just 35% Asian galleries. And this year, the increase was especially apparent in the number of Korean galleries. So there were 31 Korean galleries, which is, 25% of all the exhibitors in the fair, as well as a very high number of Japanese galleries and an increase in Chinese galleries, both up significantly from years past. And I think there are, multiple factors that inform this kind of demographic shift. The primary one being economic. These major art fairs like Frieze and Art Basel, they're expensive for galleries to take part in. And the reality is that it's simply not feasible for some galleries to continue to participate in every single iteration of these fairs. Frieze has fairs in London, New York, Los Angeles, and Seoul, of course. And then Art Basel has Basel, Paris, Miami, Hong Kong, and then next year they're going to have a fair in Doha, Qatar. So, it's really hard for a lot of galleries, particularly in the mid-market, to really be a part of all these fairs. It's a massive investment on their part, and given the art market correction that we've been experiencing in the past several years, I think it's no surprise that many art dealers are sort of paring back their art fair operations or being more sort of strategic in terms of where they're going. Now, we also have the Armory Show that takes place at the same time as Frieze Seoul, and this may be a factor as well in sort of reducing the number of particularly American galleries that come to the fair. And I think when you walk through Frieze Seoul, you definitely notice a different feel, a different vibe. But I think the shift toward having more Korean galleries and Asian galleries, but this is Frieze Seoul, right? And I think having 25% Korean galleries is in some way a reflection of this sort of sustained interest in Korean culture more broadly, right? Which at this point has become extremely entrenched in the global popular consciousness. I think people are genuinely interested and curious about Korean art, and Frieze Seoul is in a really unique position to cater to that curiosity. So the fair is definitely taking on a more regional character, but it's actually not all that different from what's happened with Frieze Los Angeles. 45% of the exhibitors this year at Frieze LA were from LA. So it seems like Frieze is sort of wisely embracing the cities where it operates, and I think focusing more on creating meaningful experiences for local galleries and really engaging the local audiences as well.
So I wasn't in Seoul for the fair this year, as I was in New York for the Armory. They occur during the same week. They're both owned by Frieze. Hopefully, one day in the future, maybe next year, they won't be during the same time and I'll have a chance to go to Seoul. You were there on the ground at Frieze Seoul. Tell us, what was the energy like at this year's edition? And did it feel like the same level of excitement and buzz as in the early years, or has the atmosphere shifted?
The energy was good. The vibes were strong. We had a lot of international visitors. I think it was something like people from 160 museums and institutions around the world came into Seoul for the fair. And I think, you have to sort of look at the fair holistically in terms of not just what's happening in the halls of COEX, but also around the city and the sort of collateral programs. So there's a performance program. Frieze is very good at sort of corralling a lot of resources to create lots of other opportunities. And then the local institutions and the sort of nonprofits operating the city also bring in a lot of curators and have these sort of studio visit programs. Not to mention obviously all the VIP programs that the fair offers. But I think overall it was a very positive and upbeat mood. I think it was improved from last year. I think we were all really worried last year about the future of our industry. And like I said before, I think there was some trepidation, particularly with all these gallery closures that we've been seeing in the past, over the summer, basically, with Blum, et cetera. So I think, yeah, the fair definitely seemed to meet or surpass expectations. I think most of the art dealers were pretty satisfied, and I think everyone is sort of getting better at understanding this market. Frieze Seoul is not going to have these mega high value works that you're going to see at Art Basel in Basel or Frieze London for that matter. I think dealers are becoming more savvy in terms of what sells here, what the market is sort of interested in, and what people really respond to. And yeah, I think that leads to more success because yeah, it's just more strategic and more deliberate.
So there, of course, were a lot of sales at a variety of price points at this year's edition. What stood out to you as some of the most noteworthy sales from this year's fair? Were there particular works, certain price points that caught your attention?
Yeah, so this year actually did have the biggest sale out of all the 4 years that Frieze Seoul has been operating. It was a Mark Bradford triptych, which sold for 4.5 million from Hauser and Wirth. And Mark Bradford is also having a solo show here in the city right now, and so you do see a lot of galleries sort of piggybacking on other sort of cultural and art moments in Seoul and around the country. So you saw a bunch of Louise Bourgeois works as well. She's having a retrospective at a museum just outside of Seoul. But you also see a ton of Korean artworks. Obviously, there was a Kim Won-gi canvas 1962 painting that went for about 1.4 million from a Korean gallery. And then, of course, the Dansekwa, hit list, Park Sabo, Chung Sang-hwa, Liu Yufan, Ha Chong-hyun. There's a bunch of those works, and they all sell very well. And it seems like every year there are two or three works by Georg Baselitz. There's always a few George Condos. Those are doing very well in this market. And I'm not sure whether they're selling to Korean collectors or to collectors from elsewhere in the region. But we are seeing, a lot of condos and Baselitz, and there were quite a lot of Kusamas as well this year. And who doesn't love seeing a bunch of Infinity Net paintings and one of those pumpkins? So I think it was a great sort of array of works on view. There was some really interesting ink painting. One Japanese gallery did a solo booth of contemporary ink painting, which was a first for me to see at a major fair. It was very, very interesting, the diversity of works on view. And I think sales were relatively strong. It wasn't a smash hit, but given the current climate in the market, I think everyone did pretty well.
So we just finished the fourth edition of Frieze Seoul. What do you think the next chapter looks like for this fair? Do you see it continuing to grow in prominence and perhaps rival some of the more established fairs?
Frieze Seoul, as I said in the beginning, it has been running concurrently with KIAF, which is the big domestic art fair that's been, I think this is its 23rd year or something like that. It's been around for a long time, and I think it's been a very fruitful partnership. KIAF occupies the first floor of the COEX Convention Center, and Frieze is up on the third floor. Not so unlike the arrangement in Basel. But next year is the final year of their initial contract. They have a 5-year partnership deal. And as of now, we haven't seen what's happening with that in the future, but I think it is safe to say that Frieze will continue to run its fair in Seoul, and most likely will continue in the current arrangement with KIAF. But everyone here is sort of holding their breath. Is Frieze still going to be around next year? But Frieze just opened this permanent exhibition space, Frieze House Seoul, where I'm the director, and it's a long-term project, a permanent place for galleries to hold remote exhibitions in Seoul. I think that signals a very strong, lasting commitment to the city and really an intention to be a more integral part of the art scene here year round, not just, a single week in September. Just to explain a bit about what Frieze House Seoul is. Frieze operates a permanent exhibition space in London, and it has done for the past 5 years, I believe. It's called Number 9 Cork Street, and it's part of the Frieze organization, and it sort of offers a space for galleries that are either already in the Frieze Art Fair network to hold exhibitions, and it can also be a runway for other galleries, newer galleries that perhaps want to participate in the fairs or just want to have a presence in that city. And then, 5 years later, Frieze Seoul has done pretty well in the city and become a really important fair for the Frieze organization more generally. And so what we've done here is we have this beautiful house. It's a house that was built in the 1980s. With a beautiful garden, a really interesting interior spaces. It doesn't feel very Korean at all. It doesn't feel like architecturally it fits in any place in particular. It's a really interesting dynamic space. And we're planning to, follow that model that Number 9 Cork Street has really proven to be viable. So we opened just last week during Frieze Week with a group show of 14 queer artists, and it's curated by a local independent curator named Jae-suk Kim. And it's really a fantastic show. We are working with artists from 9 different galleries, so really, bringing everything that we can to bear upon this collaboration, which expands from Korean galleries to galleries all over the world. We've had a great response. A lot of people, I think, are very curious about what this might be, particularly Korean people, because everyone just knows Frieze as this 1 week long event. But I think people are very pleasantly surprised when they arrive and when they see these gallery spaces. It's really a very special place, and we're planning to activate it with public programs, screenings, talks, all kinds of things beyond just the exhibition program, to really make sure that we become sort of a house of culture and not just a rental exhibition space. But it's very exciting, and I'm very happy and proud to be leading it sort of into the future. And this, I think, really is a big part of the next chapter for Frieze in Seoul. So, there's a lot to look forward to. And hopefully it will be a regular stop on people's itineraries when they do visit Seoul, whether for the fair or any other time of year. So, really, really psyched about what's to come.
Well, congratulations again on your new role as director of Frieze House Seoul. And Andy, thanks so much for joining us on the podcast to share your perspective on how the fourth year of Frieze Seoul went. If our listeners want to learn more about the programming at Frieze House Seoul or follow you on social, how can we do that?
Frieze.com has a dedicated page for our space here at Frieze House Seoul. My social is still Seoul Art Friend on Instagram, where I'm still posting, regular updates, the greatest shows that I see here in the city. And my book, which we talked about last year, is now in its second edition. So it's now available once more, and that's a book covering 25 millennial Korean artists. But I do encourage people to check out the Frieze website. We have some great images of the show, and you can see how the space looks. And yeah, it's really quite something. So thank you, Adam. I appreciate you having me on again.
Perfect. Looking forward to staying in touch, and hopefully I'll see you in Seoul next year.